So welcome everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and this is one of the sort of first kind of webinars we've really done about our activity. As Jerry says, Community Climate Action has been born out of a community project in North Suffolk and South Norfolk, and we're currently being incubated by the Climate Majority Project, which was previously known as the Moderate Flank. You may or may not know a little bit about that, but I'll give you a bit of background. I've been in Extinction Rebellion since the start, since 2018, very involved in the political circle, in the operations team, heading up the digital team. And while others from maybe Insulate Britain and Burning Pink and Just Stop Oil have gone off to be the radical flank, there was a whole bunch of us that said, well, maybe we should form the moderate flank, which is a home for people who might not be on the road to committing acts of civil disobedience, on the basis that I think about 80% of people don't think the government's doing enough on climate change, and 60% of people want to take action but don't know what to do. And while civil disobedience might be a logical consequence of the government's inaction on climate change, we're aiming to create a very broad church for those that want to act, those that want to do something now. And community climate action is one of the core bits of the Climate Majority Project. And as Jerry said, he and I met at a meetup in Bidston discussing what that activity kind of looks like. What does it feel like? So wanted to tell you today a little bit of our story. So thanks for your time. And like I say, reading the bios in the chat, really impressed and slightly intimidated by the quality of the audience here. So I'm sure it'll be a fruitful discussion, and I'm hoping it will both inspire and that there can be some cross-pollination and mutual learning, because we're aiming not to reinvent the wheel or duplicate, and we all respectively stand on the shoulders of giants, and there's much really good activity going on. But we want to try and put it under a banner and call it something. We've called it Community Climate Action. In this room, I'm invariably preaching to the converted. So the starting point is the government isn't coming to save us. That they don't have a plan. They've got no credible. The High Court has ruled there's no credible route, or their plan isn't credible in terms of reaching net zero even by 2050. COP is a failure, as I'm sure we all know. It's in United Arab Emirates with the head of a global oil company as the president this year. I'm not expecting great things from COP. It's a massive talking shop and a bit of a lobbying for the exchange of fossil fuel contracts. And the United Nations have declared code red for humanity. And this is the path that we're on, and we've really got to accept it's going to get terrible. It's going to get really bad. We are going to breach 1.5 degrees. We're exceeding our planetary boundaries, and there's probably nothing right now we can do to stop that. But we can still act. And so while the United Nations have declared code red for humanity, also the proceedings for the National Academy of Science have confirmed that global warming is already on the verge of crossing 1.5 degrees, even if the climate forcing pathway is substantially reduced in the near term, and we're nowhere near that. So we're going to be really difficult, troublesome territory. So part of what we're doing in terms of community climate action is really planning for those kind of scenarios, as well as doing everything that we can to mitigate and adapt, to mitigate the effects and adapt to our changing weather and environment. But I just want to say as well, because people speak of hope as if it's this delicate, ephemeral thing made of whispers and spiders' webs. And it's not. Hope has dirt on her face and blood on her knuckles and the grit of cobblestones in her hair, and just spat out a tooth as she rises for another go. And that's where we are. And it's not about getting knocked down. It's about how we pick ourselves up. And this is one of my favorite quotes from Sir James Bevan, who's chair of the Environment Agency. So climate change plus growth, and I noticed that one of the questions in the chat was about degrowth. That's a really interesting topic. So climate change plus growth is an existential threat to our economy, our environment, our security, our happiness, and our way of life. And we can choose to ignore this problem, or we can choose to tackle it. And I'm betting that you're all in this room because you think the second approach is preferable to the first. So I just want to touch on Extinction Rebellion and community climate action. It's not a zero-sum game. You know, get out on the streets, cause mayhem and mischief and trouble for the establishment, because civil disobedience has been a core part of change for the whole of human existence, in terms of you know, the Chartists, the Levelers, the suffragettes. And you know, Noam Chomsky said that change is rarely a gift from above. It always comes from struggles from below. But I drew this little diagram because XR is the tip of a spear, and it's, you know, it creates space behind it. But I've having dedicated 4 years of my life to Extinction Rebellion on the theory of change, that mass civil disobedience will force the government to take action on climate change. 4 years later, we're out of time and we're no closer because there is no mass. You know, and I would love to see you at the big one. I'm going to physically be there. But I don't think 100,000 people protesting is enough to change the government or change policy. And even if we did change the government, we'd probably have a choice between bad or less bad. Now, behind Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil, and they're very brave individuals that are willing to sacrifice their liberty for this cause, they create a void. You know, they've successfully moved the Overton window to the point where lots of people are talking about climate like they never have before. But behind that, because Extinction Rebellion specifically don't talk about solutions because they don't figure a citizens' assembly, there is a void. There is a big gap. And if we don't fill that gap with a positive story of abundance or systemic change, then the Daily Mail fills that with a hair shirt future, or the Telegraph fills it with how climate change, literally the headline I saw was how climate change was a plan to topple Western democracy. Yeah, that's what we're faced against. We all know the story about you know, the oligarch-controlled media and how it's not in their interest. We have to fill that void. So the other pillars of that triangle are community action and deliberative democracy. And so that's really what we're going to be focusing on today. So I'm just going to ask, what's your plan? I can't quite see everyone in the room, but maybe, I mean, who's got a plan? Can't see any hands up. So the question, what's your plan, was the theme of Extinction Rebellion's October 2019 rebellion, I think. And we asked the government, what's your plan? We asked the ministries, what's your plan? And personally, I convened a People's Assembly in Parliament with representatives from industry. So we had Dale Vince talking to Bayes. We had an ex-chief superintendent talking to the Home Office. And, you know, some farmers talking to DEFRA. And we were literally like, what's your plan? There really hasn't been a response to that. And I can't see any credible plan. So community climate action is all about writing our plan, grassroots, ground up, using deliberative democracy. So community climate action is set up to write and enact our community climate action plans to meet our respective district and county council climate emergency targets. Now, some might be better than others, and looking at Bromsgrove and Worcester, not so great, but you know, we can perhaps improve on those. But the basic premise is we are acting in support of our parish, our town, our district, and our county, and ultimately our government policy. So, you know, what's to object to? We all know it's urgent. It has to be done at some point, and it will take us all. So from my perspective, and Rupert Read talks a lot about the precautionary principle, I figure we best just crack on. Let's get it done. And we can do this because it's our civic duty and we're acting in the best interests of our community. And, you know, while we're at it, we're not just reducing our carbon, we're also increasing biodiversity. We're also improving the quality of our air and reducing the amount of particulates and pollution that we might be emitting in the meantime. So, you know, we can make England a much greener and more pleasant land. You might have seen the People's Plan for Nature, because, you know, I think Britain's in the bottom 10% of countries for biodiversity. So we've got work cut out. So what we're doing is we're growing community resilience in the face of crises by way of mutual aid. And mutual aid has become a common term following the pandemic. So I think we're all pretty used to that just in our communities in terms of how we come together to face these crises. And it is a bit of a polycrisis right now with cost of living, cost of energy, potentially recession, increasing inflation, and these kind of things. So really, it's about how we come together as communities. So we're basing it around our community farm and our pub, and I can talk at length about community benefit societies and how they should be the custodian and the vehicle for this systemic change, because they're not for private profit. So if a community benefit society owns your community energy generation, or in fact even delivers your retrofitting, the surplus doesn't go overseas, it doesn't go to shareholders, it comes back to the benefit of the community. So we've kicked off with our 3 parishes locally, which is a parish of Thelneetham, Hopton-cum-Nettishall, and Blow Norton. And we've gone to, and I'll talk about the methodology, but we've gone to our parish councils and said, we'd like to write a community climate action plan. Will you support that? And the National Lottery liked the idea so much that they've given us a little bit of money to go and do it. So we've got formal votes of support for the activity from each parish council. So iFarm, our community benefit society, becomes the delivery partner, but it becomes parish activity. So it's formal parish activity, which is really important. And the National Lottery funded it because it's replicable, it's scalable, and it leaves a legacy. So we've got our pub, we've got a nice 10 acres of land at iFarm, and we're in some very rural parishes that actually cross the border into Norfolk. So it's not just Suffolk, although there's a lot of focus on Suffolk in the presentation. But it's 3 parishes, 2 different counties, 2 different districts. And like I say, we're basing our activity around a pub, which is a great place to have conversations over a pint. We're supported and funded by our district council, Plunkett Foundation, Power to Change, kind of the usual suspects that would probably support Community Benefit Society. But this particular activity is nationally funded. And that's Dave and one of the bits of fungus on our land. And so this is iFarm. We've got 10 acres and we're doing some limited market gardening, and we're doing some nature-based conservation and carbon sequestration, this kind of thing. And you wouldn't believe the amount of rubbish we've cleared, tons and tons of metal and plastic. But we've now got some rigs down, and we're growing garlic and onion and 1,000,001 other things that Brian, our master gardener, would tell you about, 15 different varieties of tomato, that kind of thing. And we're hoping to connect that farm to plate straight to the pub, because everyone loves a story about food. So a lot of what we're doing in terms of community climate action is storytelling. And a lot of these stories, they resonate already. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. People understand there are systemic challenges. And, we're in a very rural area that's blue through and through, that's Brexit voting. But the story that we're telling still resonates because people really understand, and we've still got surprisingly large pockets of deprivation when it comes to fuel poverty, 20% above the national average, food and other pressures on the economy and work and what have you, and resourcing. So we've taken on our community pub via the government's community ownership fund. We're telling a story about how we can create the pub as a net exporter of energy. We can be a power station. And then that has a wider consequence in terms of looking at a smart energy microgrid for the village. So we've got some really large engineering aspirations, and we're on the journey to, as part that being part of our net zero aspiration. But it kind of starts where we are. It starts where you are. You might have an asset of community value. You might have an existing organization. You might have some existing groups that want to partner. We're providing warm spaces in winter. Because we're a community benefit society, our 2 purposes are environmental education and protection, and health and well-being. And health and well-being is social isolation and loneliness. But where those two things meet is the climate and ecological emergency, because that's environmental protection and education, but it's also health and well-being. Because without a healthy environment, you can't have the other one. And there's so much eco-anxiety around in our young people and our communities right now that that's really part of what we're talking about. The rest of the presentation is about methodology, skills, funding, and organization.